I remember the first time I truly felt it, the hollow sensation of moving without moving, like I was caught in a loop, endlessly busy but nowhere real to arrive. It wasn't the kind of tired you can shake off with sleep or a day off. No, this was something deeper, a kind of invisible weight pressing down inside me, where neither my mind nor my body found rest. I would wake up, checklist in hand, eager to tackle the day's demands, but by midday, that restless emptiness would creep back in, dulling every small win, every completed task. The strange thing was I was doing a lot. I was accomplishing, producing, checking boxes. Yet, inside me, there was this quiet alarm ringing. Something was wrong. I saw it in my friends, too. Men who hustled harder than anyone I knew, grinding to get ahead. Yet their eyes held that same flicker of dissatisfaction. They'd pile their days with appointments, calls, projects, even workouts, but beneath all that activity was still a kind of frozen state, like a body stuck mid-step, waiting for a signal that never came. I wondered why the energy wasn't matching the effort. Why, despite all the forward motion, it felt like we were just treading water. There's a moment in our lives, maybe it came for you, or maybe it's creeping up, that nagging question, am I really going somewhere? Starts to burn. It's not about reaching some distant finish line or nailing down a perfect plan. It's about the feeling in your chest, your gut, your limbs, an ancient signal your own body gives you when it senses a path, a direction, a rhythm that holds meaning. When that sense fades, everything else starts to unravel. Tasks lose their gravity. Even the victories feel thin, like hollow echoes in an empty room. The engine is running, but the fuel gauge reads empty. I've come to realize that this isn't just a mental glitch or a motivational slump. It's something biological, primal. Our bodies are wired to respond to movement that has purpose. When we don't perceive progress, even if the calendar says we're busy, the mind and body go quiet. It's subtle, but your body knows. Can't be fooled by busy work or distractions. And beneath the surface, your energy levels, your motivation, your very vitality begin to withdraw, like a candle flickering in a draft. This isn't simply about feeling down or overwhelmed. It's an existential fatigue that gnaws quietly at your spirit. The kind where starting new things almost feels like a trap. You begin projects full of fire and conviction, but somewhere along the way, that fire sputters out. You abandon the chase, only to circle back and try again with the same faded spark. Each time feels more draining than the last, and each stop and start feeds a narrative in your mind. I'm stuck. I don't have direction. That narrative isn't just words. It becomes a chain around your vitality, your drive, and even your clarity. And the body responds as it must. It scales down its investment in energy, libido, and mental sharpness as if protecting itself from an endless, unproductive drain. It's like your system senses, at a very deep level, that there's no real forward motion and adjusts accordingly. This process feels invisible, but the impact is tangible, haunting. Nothing excites you, nothing keeps you steady, and your best intentions fade into fragments. I've lived this, and I know it's painful. It feels like being caught in a fog you can't cut through, no matter how hard you try. The pressure mounts quietly, slowly suffocating the parts of you that once burned bright. It's a place many men never talk about because it feels like failure, weakness, or something you should just power through. But the truth is different. This state isn't a sign that you're broken or lazy. It's a call from inside, a signal that the way you've been moving isn't aligned with where you actually need to go, and your body is desperately crying out for a real sense of direction. Before I stepped into the clarity that finally changed everything for me, I was trapped by this cycle. Busy days blended into exhausted nights filled with frustration. The more I tried to force progress, the more exhausted I became. I searched for quick fixes, new routines, different goals, distractions, but none of it stuck because none of it responded to the real issue. My body wasn't convinced I had a path worth following. Without that conviction inside, everything else felt hollow. If you're sitting with this feeling now, you're not alone. And this isn't the end of your story. There is a way out of this loop, not through sudden leaps or magic solutions, but through a quiet, deliberate rebuilding of the signals between your mind, your body, and your life's direction. It's about reconnecting with that internal compass that signals movement and meaning so profoundly it brings your energy back to life, filling you with a steady fire instead of flickering flames. I invite you to sit with this for a moment. How long have you felt like you're moving in circles, not really progressing despite all the effort? This question is more important than it seems. This feeling, the one you try to ignore or push past, is a doorway. And what lies beyond it is not just an answer, but a transformation waiting for you to step into. So take a breath with me. This isn't about judgment or quick fixes. It's about beginning to see your experience clearly and preparing to take the first true steps toward reclaiming your sense of direction, the kind that your body can feel with certainty. Because when that feeling returns, everything else will follow. There was a time when I found myself staring at the same four walls, day after day, as if trapped inside a looping maze without an exit. The days blurred together, filled with countless to-dos and sporadic bursts of energy. Yet an invisible wall prevented any meaningful breakthrough. I remember dramatically shifting from one project to another, hoping that the next endeavor would ignite a spark, only to be met with an unrelenting void. It was as if my internal compass had lost its magnetic pull. Nothing managed to anchor me, and I drifted aimlessly through each moment. One afternoon, I recall sitting outside under a sprawling oak tree, hands cradling a lukewarm cup of coffee, when I realized the exhaustion wasn't just physical, but permeated my entire existence. It was an invisible weight lodged deep beneath the surface, sapping enthusiasm for things I once loved. My thoughts raced, jumping from one concern to another, yet none brought relief or clarity. The exhaustion felt like a silent storm raging inside, wearing down my resolve. I understood then that my struggle was far from ordinary fatigue. This was a profound depletion of vitality that trickled down to my very essence. In that same moment, I heard a conversation between two old men nearby. One said, "Son, the toughest part ain't the hard work. It's the feeling that you're spinning your wheels. That's when you start losing something inside." Their words lingered with me. It painted a vivid picture of not just being busy but being detached from any notion of progress. This was more than a simple lull. It was a subtle disappearance of momentum that erodes spirit and poise. It pushed me to rethink what I truly meant by moving forward, to reevaluate my inner experience beyond external markers of achievement. As days went on, I gradually noticed another pattern forming. My evenings grew restless, marred by a nagging sensation that I wasn't bridging the gap between where I stood and where I yearned to go. Tasks once straightforward began to feel overwhelming or pointless. My mornings might have started with optimism, but somewhere along the way, a creeping cloud would smother that optimism, leaving me drained and reluctant to engage wholeheartedly. I saw how my efforts disintegrated into fragmented motion without cohesion or direction. It was as though my spirit was adrift on a vast sea without a guiding star. The most alarming truth was the absence of trust in what lay ahead. Every step felt like stepping on uncertain ground. On several occasions, I tried to grasp control, juggling goals, setting deadlines, or even promising myself a fresh start. But these gestures seemed to fall flat, bounced back by an intangible resistance. It reminded me of a river blocked by fallen trees, always looking for a way around obstacles but never able to surge forward in its full force. The repeated frustration bred cynicism in me. Each failure whispered that perhaps progress was a myth or an elusive fantasy meant for others, not me. This self-doubt became a twisted echo chamber, amplifying hesitation and dimming the courage to press onward. One evening, I spoke to a close friend about what I was experiencing. He listened without judgment, then shared a striking insight. Sometimes, it's less about chasing big breakthroughs and more about recognizing how small choices build the bridge you need, he said. This idea struck a chord. I had been so fixated on dramatic shifts and monumental changes that I overlooked the power in aligning small actions consistently. It was like trying to leap to a distant shore without appreciating the stepping stones beneath my feet. From that conversation, I began to experiment. I started paying attention to the tiny, often overlooked decisions, the way I greeted the morning, how I organized a workspace, or even the choice to pause and breathe when overwhelm threatened to take over. These small adjustments, repeated day after day, began to stitch together a subtle fabric of forward movement. Soon, the fog started to lift, and I sensed momentum returning. Not as a sudden surge, but as a quiet hum of progress that grew steadily louder. This gradual rebuilding process reshaped my understanding entirely. Progress isn't always about sweeping victories or giant leaps. It often emerges through persistent nudges that recalibrate the entire system over time. The energy stirred by these changes carried a different quality. A grounded endurance that fueled hope rather than fleeting bursts of adrenaline. What had been an evasive concept became tangible and real through persistence and patience. Now, I want you to hold onto this insight. The path to rediscovering a fulfilling course can be woven through deliberate daily movements that register deeply beneath our conscious efforts. When these small signals are consistent, they transform the subtle rhythms inside us, sparking renewed vitality and confidence. Imagine waking up with an ingrained feeling that you are not only moving but truly advancing, that you're constructing a meaningful narrative thread through every choice and action. Reflect on how this might manifest when you face moments of doubt or stagnation. Instead of overwhelming yourself with grand expectations, consider how shifting a few daily habits could slowly rearrange the internal landscape. What if progress was less about rushing ahead and more about nurturing a persistent flow, one small step at a time? Envision the strength in steady repetition that reestablishes connection with a deeper drive and hope. I can say from experience the transformation doesn't happen overnight, but the path becomes visible when you commit to these subtle, yet powerful adjustments. The current won't always roar, but it will begin to pulse steadily, building the courage and resilience needed for sustained forward movement. Trusting this process changed how I relate to effort, loss, and accomplishment. No longer an endless grind, but a meaningful journey paved with quiet victories and intentional choices. On one particular evening, the weight of inertia pressed down on me harder than usual. I sat at my desk, papers strewn about, plans half-formed and scattered like leaves in the wind. My mind was buzzing, yet a quiet void swallowed any real sense of purpose. It was as if I was attempting to navigate without a map, each step uncertain and hollow. Suddenly, a memory surged forward, a distant conversation with my grandfather, who once told me about a time when he cultivated his garden after a harsh winter. "You don't see the roots growing beneath the soil," he said, "but that's where the real work begins." His words echoed urgently as I wrestled with my situation. Unlike what I had been chasing, progress beneath the surface required patience and trust in unseen shifts. That evening, I realized how often I overlooked foundational work invisible to the eye. Instead of rushing toward grand results, there was a need to nurture the groundwork steadily, even when no immediate fruit appeared. Much like tending to roots hidden underground, laying down small, consistent decisions might not generate instant gratification but would eventually yield growth that's both robust and resilient. My spiraling restlessness stemmed not from a lack of ambition, but from neglecting this slow-building process. As days turned into weeks, I started observing subtle internal changes. The previous overwhelm started giving way to moments of clarity, though fleeting at first. I tracked these shifts with growing curiosity. Certain habits, like waking earlier to read, dedicating a few minutes to intentional stretching, or jotting down small wins, became anchors amidst chaotic currents. Each act cultivated a tether to momentum, a way to ground myself amid swirling uncertainty. It reminded me of a river carving its path through stone, not by force, but persistence. I grasped that forward motion didn't require monumental steps, but rather a repeated push that gradually reshaped the terrain. One afternoon, a friend casually remarked, "It looks like you've found your rhythm." His observation caught me off guard because, to me, the changes had been subtle, barely noticeable day to day. Yet his words unveiled something important. Rhythms are often invisible to those within them but unmistakable to onlookers. This insight motivated me to value quiet consistency over flashy progress, to embrace rhythms that pulled me steadily forward even when impatience tried to hijack my mindset. Around that time, an experience at a community workshop illuminated a new layer to my journey. We were paired for an exercise requiring trust. Someone would close their eyes while the other guided them through a simple obstacle course. My partner's calm voice, steady and patient, fostered a surprising sense of ease despite my vulnerability. This moment stayed with me. Cultivating direction involves not only internal resolve but external engagement anchored in trust. In life, I realized, achieving meaningful progression often demands surrender to process and connection with others who provide steady support and encouragement. That revelation reshaped how I approached relationships surrounding my sense of purpose. I started recognizing where I had isolated myself, trying to force progress solo, expecting swift leaps without aid. Instead, I began reaching out more authentically, sharing doubts, seeking input, and allowing myself to be guided at times. This shift felt like a lifeline that buoyed me in moments of wavering faith, making the journey less lonely and more anchored in collective strength. On particularly restless nights, I journaled emotions that surfaced: frustrations, fears of stagnation, hopes for breakthrough, and saw that expressing these raw feelings helped break cycles of internal resistance. Through these reflections, I uncovered narratives I had long buried, stories about worthiness and past wounds that silently confounded my ability to step confidently. Uncovering these hidden scripts was a difficult but necessary excavation, exposing fertile ground where genuine transformation could take root. At the same time, discipline took on a new meaning. Previously, I framed discipline as rigid adherence to plans, which often felt suffocating and led to burnout. Now, it transformed into a compassionate commitment, a daily decision to honor my evolving needs while maintaining gentle accountability. I became a steward of my own process, nurturing the soil without force, patiently tending what was growing beneath apparent stillness. During a weekend hike, surrounded by towering trees carved through centuries, I thought about how nature thrives not by rushing, but by adapting and persisting. Branches don't accelerate growth. They bend toward light. Roots stretch quietly underground. That afternoon symbolized much more than just a walk. It embodied the kind of directional energy I sought. Sometimes, advancement occurs in silent adjustments, those subtle but potent movements recalibrating us toward flourishing. Now, consider how this applies when you face moments clouded by confusion or stalled efforts. Instead of demanding immediate transformation, what if you allowed small shifts, those tender gestures that whisper progress, to regain their space? What if you started to nurture these barely perceptible shifts with attention and trust? The seeds of renewal often lie in patience and adaptability rather than sudden change, inviting us to steward our growth with kindness and resilience. I remember asking myself on a difficult morning, what one small thing can I do right now to align with what feels true in my core? It wasn't an overwhelming task or a grand declaration, just a quiet step forward. Brewing a cup of tea mindfully, breathing completely, sitting with discomfort without rushing away. That question realigned the internal compass subtly but surely and launched renewed momentum. Through these intertwined revelations, I discovered a richer dimension of direction, one woven from patience, trust, connection, and tender persistence. It's an ongoing dance between holding space for the unseen and engaging wholeheartedly with each small act that quietly propels us forward. I invite you to explore how these delicate threads might weave together your pathway out of disorientation toward a steady flow of meaningful motion. There was a restless evening I won't soon forget, a night where shadows seemed to close in tighter as I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment. The usual distractions failed me. Music felt hollow, screens flickered without drawing me in, and even the comfort of a warm drink couldn't anchor restlessness swirling inside. I realized, in that void, a different challenge emerged. Numbness not just of movement but of intention itself. It struck me how often energy dissipates not solely from weariness or lack of sleep, but from a deeper discord between action and authentic purpose. This absence of intentionality creates trembling uncertainty, as if navigating a maze blindfolded without even the faintest sense of direction. This moment prompted me to reflect on the intricate ways momentum arises, not just through consistent effort or positive thoughts but through cultivating resonance in body and mind. Without such harmony, any driving force feels fragmented or misaligned. Imagine a finely tuned instrument abruptly detuned. No matter how fervently someone strums its strings, the melody that emerges is discordant and unsettling. I recognize that momentum requires more than mere activity. It demands an alignment threading intentions with inner sensations. Past attempts to prod myself forward lacked this essential coherence, resulting in exhaustion masked as effort. Seeking clarity, I turned toward movement as a physical metaphor for progression. During a morning jog through autumnal trails scattered with amber leaves, I noticed how each step carried significance beyond distance covered. The rhythm, cadence, and breath synchronized, uniting mind and limbs into a singular flow. Oddly, there was freedom in allowing pace to slow, in permitting my body to tune to the terrain's subtle shifts. I observed other runners pressing relentlessly toward predetermined goals, faces strained and hurried, tension echoing in their shoulders. Their progress seemed mechanical rather than spirited, like actors repeating lines without emotion. That contrast revealed how authentic advancement grows from presence and acceptance rather than rushed striving. From that walk came a startling insight. Sustainable forward movement cultivates through delicate attunement, not muscular force alone. It requires openness to signals often overshadowed by noise, moments of discomfort signaling areas demanding attention, instincts whispering cautions or nudges, and quiet pulses urging patience. This delicate dance demands sensitivity. Impatience or disregard dissipates momentum faster than inactivity. I learned that embracing subtle internal shifts, including emotional turbulence, nourishes the roots of genuine progression. Paradoxically, surrendering to vulnerability became a gateway rather than obstacle toward renewed vitality. Later, I found myself seated beside a colleague during a late-night brainstorming session. We had reached an impasse, ideas drifting without cohesion. Frustration simmered until she suggested an exercise, sharing not just goals but current emotional currents influencing our creative flow. Speaking openly about discouragements and hopes transformed the room's energy. The collective weight softened, and solutions sparked with greater ease. It occurred that fostering momentum extends beyond solitary efforts. It thrives within relational exchanges where authenticity circulates freely. Barriers erected by silence or self-criticism clog the channels of inspiration and movement. In following days, I experimented with vulnerability as a cornerstone of momentum. Conversations with friends shifted from surface talk to deeper reflections, revealing hidden fears and unnoticed hopes. Unexpectedly, these exchanges provided clarity about what had stalled me. Rather than confronting obstacles alone, sharing reshaped problems into manageable threads, woven with communal resilience. Momentum, I discovered, can unfold as a shared rhythm, pulsing through connection and mutual trust. This renewed sense of interplay brightened my outlook and replenished emotional reserves. A few weeks after, during a rain-soaked morning hike, droplets traced patterns along mossy stones and fern fronds. The setting reminded me how ecosystems flourish through complex interdependence, each organism playing a vital role, however small, in sustaining balance. Alone but connected, I pondered how my own progression depended on recognizing interwoven influences beyond direct control. Habits, relationships, environment, and even whispering doubts. Progress doesn't usually sprint forward. It meanders, pauses, and sometimes even backslides, only to gain strength from the confluence of factors converging meaningfully. Returning from that hike, I realized expectations about relentless, linear progress demanded revision. Rather than martyring myself to steady upward climbs, I found grace in cycles of expansion and contraction, akin to breathing depths whose rhythm undulates yet sustains life. This more fluid understanding allowed me to approach goals with gentler rigor and resisting perfectionism's unforgiving grip. Patience became essential, not passive waiting but active acknowledgement of unfolding processes beyond immediate sight. Now, sitting here sharing these reflections, I encourage you to consider how your own movement might be enriched by embracing complexity, the tension between pushing forward and yielding, between solitude and connection, between intention and receptivity. What nuances within your experience offer clues to recalibrate the rhythm of progress? Might slowing down enough to detect subtle shifts open doors previously unseen? Inviting such attunement does not signify weakness but a sophisticated collaboration between will and wisdom, grounding momentum in durable foundations. If you recognize fatigue not just in body but spirit, perhaps it's time to explore new modalities of engagement, beyond checking tasks off lists or forcing results. Approach your days with curiosity toward internal rhythms and interactions fueling them. Foster spaces where honestly voiced struggles mingle with shared encouragement. Let movement unfurl not as task-bound grinding but as an orchestrated symphony of presence, trust, and gradual ascent. Through this richly textured, connected path, vitality returns. Not through abrupt leaps but measured strides weaving meaning into every step. Reflecting on this journey so far, I find myself caught in a delicate web woven from subtle threads of realization and inner stirring. It's as if a distant melody is growing louder, harmonizing the echoes of frustration, hope, and awakening that have quietly shaped my path. Each step, no matter how tentative or faltering, has contributed to a shifting landscape within me, where the vague unease that once hovered like fog begins to clear, revealing contours of meaning and direction I hadn't dared to see before. I recall moments when movement seemed almost mechanical, performed out of obligation rather than conviction, when energy coursed through my limbs but failed to ignite a spark within. Those times now appear like scenes from a play where the actors know their lines but have lost the passion to breathe life into them. Yet not all was lost. Hidden beneath that dissonance were faint vibrations of possibility, faint signals whispering that something essential was stirring, quietly gathering force. It's the sensation of a seed deepening its roots in dark soil, unnoticed by the naked eye, yet gearing up for a sudden surge. As I navigated this groundless terrain, I realized that the map had been shifting without my awareness. What once seemed like confusion or exhaustion masked an invitation, a call to attune more deeply to rhythms I had ignored or dismissed. This invitation didn't promise swift answers or grand revelations. Instead, it urged me to dwell in the space where uncertainty and trust converge, where the act of stepping forward, no matter how small, transcends the need for immediate clarity. Like a sailor sensing the subtle breeze before setting sail, I learned to appreciate the quiet forces that eventually propel us toward change. Along this evolving journey, I encountered moments of unexpected grace. A brief conversation, a passing insight, a silent pause, each weaving threads into a tapestry more intricate than I had imagined. These fragments, fragile and fleeting, combined to recalibrate my awareness. There was power in embracing vulnerability, strength in surrendering to rhythms beyond control. I came to see that progress does not always roar. Sometimes, it hums softly under the surface, persistent and patient, preparing the ground for transformation that can be sensed only through attuned perception. This growing awareness reshaped how I engaged with the tension between anticipation and stillness. Instead of battling waves of doubt or rushing to fill voids with frantic activity, I started to cultivate a steadiness, a presence rooted in quiet confidence. It resembled a tree bending graciously under the wind's touch, flexible yet unyielding, deeply anchored yet responsive. I discovered that true momentum is woven from patience and movement in tandem, a dance of resilience and openness that honors both progress and pause. Through this unfolding process, I sensed an emerging dialogue between inner experience and outer action, a dynamic interplay that redefined my relationship to energy and purpose. There was an awakening to the possibility that direction is less a fixed destination and more an evolving compass, shaped by daily choices, subtle shifts, and profound honesty with oneself. This perspective reframed struggle and surrendered desperation into fertile ground for growth, where fragmented pieces come together not by force but through alignment and gentle persistence. In these reflections, I invite you to consider the currents within your own experience, the subtle signals, elusive rhythms, and quiet urgencies that move beneath awareness. Trust that beneath apparent stillness or circular wandering lies an undercurrent of meaning beginning to weave a path forward. The tapestry is still unfolding. What once seemed tangled now starts revealing gentle patterns, drawing you toward a greater harmony between intent and embodiment. Our shared journey toward reclaiming energy and purpose is not defined by leaps or perfect clarity, but by embracing the tensions inherent in becoming, between rest and motion, uncertainty and emergence, introspection and declaration. As these themes intertwine, they create a resonant hum that invites us to listen closely, to let go of resistance, and to walk toward a horizon painted not with rigid certainty, but with courageous openness. The story isn't finished. Rather, it is moving toward a moment of arrival, an integration of all these subtle awakenings into a renewed sense of self that moves freely, grounded in a pulse both ancient and immediate. It is within this unfolding mystery that I find both challenge and promise, and I welcome you to stand here with me on the cusp, ready to step into what comes next. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself tracing the path my life has taken. The twists and turns, the abrupt stops, the moments when the road stretched out endlessly without a clear destination in sight. I remember a time when each day's labor blurred into the next, my body moving through motions that no longer resonated with purpose. It wasn't exhaustion you could fix with rest or distraction. This was a subtle withdrawal of energy, as if my very core was retreating in silent protest. The quiet surrender of vitality demanded I face a profound question. What does it truly mean to move forward? I recall a conversation with an old mentor during a chilly autumn afternoon. His voice carried a calm conviction when he said, "Progress isn't always measured by miles traveled, but by the harmony between where your body takes you and where your heart believes you're going." In that moment, I understood that direction exists beyond maps, plans, or timelines. It lives as a feeling, a deep, visceral knowing that guides every step, even when the destination remains shrouded in uncertainty. Our bodies serve as trusted messengers, signaling whether the journey embodies growth or traps us in relentless cycles of futility. What struck me most was how easily the absence of this inner compass silenced enthusiasm. Tasks once inspiring drained into tedious routines. Ambitions lost their glow as my system unconsciously pulled back its energy, guarding itself against meaningless expenditure. Vitality diminished, clarity blurred, and confidence waned, painting a portrait of stagnation that I couldn't outrun. The paradox was sharp. I was engaged in constant activity but starved of meaningful movement. The irony cut deep, so much motion, yet no true progress. One evening, when the sky was heavy with rain and my mind swirled in restless shadows, I confronted a truth I had long avoided. Growth doesn't reside in giant leaps or sudden epiphanies alone. It is born in the quiet commitment to small, aligned choices made with intention and patience. Like steady rain shaping the landscape over time, these incremental shifts gradually reshape our internal terrain, coaxing life from places long dormant. Our bodies respond profoundly to this cadence, reigniting energy reserves and rekindling that vital spark. As I began to witness subtle changes, moments when my gaze cleared and resolve strengthened, I realized how deep the need was for rituals grounding me in purpose. Not grand gestures, but simple acts. A deliberate breath, a mindful pause, the choice to honor a morning's promise. Each one whispered, "You're moving forward." These whispers accumulated, forging a rhythm that my body recognized and leaned into, offering renewed strength and clarity. The transformation held a gentle power, unlocking doors that brute force could never breach. I remember sharing this awakening with a friend over coffee, his eyes bright with understanding. "It's like learning a new dance," he said, "where you don't rush the steps but listen to the music inside." In that metaphor, I found both comfort and challenge. To embrace the dance of direction required courage, the willingness to trust hidden rhythms, to sway with uncertainty, to accept imperfection without surrendering momentum. It meant embodying faith in the process over the impulse for control. This journey reshaped my relationship with time and progress itself. Instead of demanding answers or harshly judging setbacks, I learned to hold space for growth as an unfolding story, one where each pause and pivot enriches the narrative rather than diminishes it. Movement became less about escaping a void and more about weaving a tapestry of intention, resilience, and authenticity. I found that the body's call for purpose is a sacred invitation to reconnect with our most fundamental truths. If you find yourself wrestling with the invisible drag of endless doing and no arriving, know that you are not alone. The path forward may feel obscured, but it is present within you, in the same flicker that urges you to keep searching, to keep feeling, to keep stepping. Trust that your body's wisdom holds keys to this passage. When you nurture a genuine sense of direction through your daily, seemingly small choices, You initiate a profound renewal that reverberates far deeper than the mind alone can grasp. So tonight, as the world quiets and you turn inward, ask yourself what step you can take. Not a giant leap, but a simple, intentional movement that brings your body and spirit into accord. Let that be your declaration, that despite doubts and detours, you honor the sacred conversation between your deepest self and the journey ahead. From this embrace, kinetic energy will arise, carrying you forward on a path alive with meaning and possibility. And in that steady, authentic progression, you reclaim the essence of what it means to truly live.